Hi, welcome to Stressless Leadership, a corporate leaders and entrepreneurs guide to overcoming stress and building resilience for yourself and your employees. I'm Morgan Jobe, and I'm an executive coach and trainer who specializes in stress reduction for leaders and their teams. Today's episode is part 2 of Getting to Know Stress. And I'm going to help you to understand the 4 categories or types of stress that we experience and the impact that too much stress can have on our health and our performance. So last time I explained how stress is really a broad term that encompasses a lot of different experiences and conditions that we might go through. It's important to be able to categorize the types of stress that we are experiencing, because that can really help us to know what specifically to do most effectively to reduce it. So remember, we're not simply dealing with a stressor. We're ultimately trying to rebalance our nervous system. So some of the things that I'm going to mention to you today, well, they might surprise you because you've maybe never thought of them as stress. But as I mentioned in the last episode, one of the major reasons that I think people fail to deal with stress before it starts to significantly affect their health and performance is because they don't recognize it as stress. So if you find yourself surprised at some of these things I mentioned as being forms of stress, that's a good thing, because ultimately it means you're expanding your understanding of stress. So the first one I'd like to discuss in my model of stress is physical stress. And this category of stress is pretty easy to see and to understand. I think most people would identify with it because we can often feel it and see its effects, and we can often even measure it with medical devices. Physical stress can occur when we push our body past its physical limitations. It can also happen, for example, when we're being exposed to toxins or things that we eat and drink, and really even the air that we breathe. It often impacts our energy levels, and it can limit our ability to function physically in many ways. And while other types of stress often have physical aspects associated with them or eventually cause physical stress, each of the 4 types of stress that I'm going to talk about today are really categorized based on where we first experience the stress. So, for example, anxiety may have certain physical symptoms associated with it, but often that's a form of emotional stress. That said, it's entirely possible to experience anxiety as a secondary effect of a physical stressor. So, what causes physical stress? Well, here's a list of some common ones. Lack of sleep. This is a big one. About a third of adult Americans don't get enough sleep. Unhealthy eating habits is another common one. Food allergies. Being overweight or underweight is also a form of stress. Illness, physical injuries, chronic pain. Yes, chronic pain is a form of stress. I had chronic pain for about 2 years, and I can assure you it is very, very stressful.
I'm going to pause right there because the door moved the camera.
Okay. Want to back up a little bit more?
Yeah.
It's just not cooperating, is it?
It's not doing right. If I do it from this side. Come on.
Why don't you move it to the very tip of the door and see if that gives it more leverage.
Good call.
See if my brief study of physics helps me. Nope. Completely worthless.
It should work. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, shoot. Where were we?
Keep going. Up, 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 up. Okay. We'll just start off with like the forms.
Is that right here?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
Right
okay.
there. So what
Got
is?
it.
So I'll raise my hand and say, here's the edit.
Okay, perfect.
So click.
All right, and recording.
Okay. Here's the edit point, physical stress. So what causes physical stress? Well, here's a list of some common ones for you. Lack of sleep. This is a big one. About 1/3 of adult Americans don't actually get enough sleep on a regular basis. Unhealthy eating habits. That's another very common one. Food allergies. It's also a form of stress. Being overweight or underweight is a type of physical stress. Illness is also in this category. Physical injuries, chronic pain. Yes, chronic pain. I had chronic pain for 2 years, and I can assure you that it is very stressful. Over-exercising is another one. I've been guilty of this one in the past. Exercise really might have surprised you here in this category because we usually associate exercise with good health in a way to help control stress. And it is an effective means for dealing with some degree of stress, but we can overexert ourselves and create more stress if we're overtraining. Medical procedures and treatments are also forms of physical stress. Now, while these are often necessary and they can be helpful, they can also be very stressful on us both physically and psychologically. Prescription medications also cause physical stress. Even though we take a lot of these medications to maybe manage or treat some serious conditions, they can have some serious side effects that are both physically stressful and in some cases even mentally or emotionally stressful. Alcohol. Consuming alcohol is stressful. Now, ironically, a lot of people use alcohol as a form of stress management to maybe take the edge off a stressful day. But it actually creates more physical stress. Our bodies can process some alcohol without serious damage, but excessive alcohol consumption really does create a lot of stress physically. Some certain types of illegal drugs, just like prescription medications, can also cause physical stress. People often start using illegal drugs as a form of self-medication for emotional stress. And it might seem to help in the beginning, but it ultimately just creates more stress in the end. So keep in mind that physical stress often causes some form of inflammation in our body. And chronic inflammation is generally recognized as leading to some form of illness. The next category is emotional stress. So realize that emotions drive our behaviors, and they can either work for us or they can work against us. Now, we all experience a variety of emotions every single day. And some of us some of those emotions are inherently stressful. We experience stressful emotions along with the fight, flight, or freeze response in our nervous system. Some examples of this are guilt, sadness, grief, disappointment, anxiety, jealousy, frustration, irritation, and anger, just to name a few. And these emotions are referred to often as negative emotions, but I don't really like that terminology because I don't think that emotions are bad. Some of these emotions can certainly be unpleasant, but they do have value because they provide valuable feedback about our experiences. That said, when we experience these kinds of stressful emotions for too long, we express them or cope with them in unhealthy ways or even suppress them, they can harm our overall well-being in a variety of ways. It's pretty well established that prolonged emotional stress has negative impacts on our physical as well as our psychological well-being and can really prevent us from performing at our best. The next type of stress is mental stress. Now, mental stress affects how much cognitive capacity we have available at any given time to process and manage information during various mental tasks that we are performing. So mental stress is often caused by overstimulation, but it can also be due to a lack of mental stimulation, like, for example, boredom. Now, a high level of mental stress inhibits our ability to be alert, to focus, and to really fully access our creativity, our intuition, our decision-making abilities, and our problem-solving skills, as well as learn and remember. So because mental stress significantly impacts learning and memory, decision-making ability, and problem-solving skills, it has an especially negative impact on people in positions of leadership. So mental stress can be caused by multitasking, working too long without taking enough breaks, having conflicting demands, becoming overwhelmed, performing tasks that you find boring for extended periods of time, and being given maybe confusing or ambiguous instructions. Mental stress can also be caused by other types of stress that I've already mentioned. And finally, the fourth type of stress is what I call spiritual stress. Now, when I say spiritual stress, I'm not talking about anything that has to do with religious practices or beliefs. It also doesn't have anything to do with demonic possession, but I can imagine that would probably be really stressful if you had that experience. So by spiritual stress, I mean stress that comes from a lack of purpose, meaning or a sense of fulfillment in our career or our life overall. So when we have a high level of spiritual stress, it often really shows up as a lack of engagement or commitment and determination in life or work. If you feel like your job, for example, lacks purpose and meaning, and maybe it isn't connected to your values, or worse, it's in direct conflict with your values, you're probably experiencing some degree of spiritual stress. Now, spiritual stress can also be associated with lacking major life goals, maybe not feeling socially connected, lacking faith or trust in something that's greater than us. Not living in alignment with our values is also a form of spiritual stress. And feeling like we can't achieve our life purpose or vision. Spiritual stress impacts our level of engagement in our career or life in general. So when we end up taking productive actions, or rather not taking productive actions, and we may actually end up taking unconscious actions that sabotage ourselves. Lacking faith or trust in ourselves and others as it relates to a specific role or goal or task or a project we're involved in also is a part of spiritual stress. When we experience spiritual stress for a long period of time, we start to feel like we're going through life without a map, or we don't have a direction or a purpose. If it goes on for too long, we can start to feel physically, mentally, and emotionally drained. Spiritual stress can be one of the causes of burnout, which is the result of unresolved chronic stress. Working in a job you hate that isn't fulfilling can certainly cause spiritual stress. But spiritual stress can also be triggered by certain life events. For example, a death of a loved one, a loss of a job, maybe loss of a business or a relationship, moving to a new city or country, and really any major change in your work. A dramatic change in your physical body from maybe an accident or an illness can also sometimes cause physical stress or spiritual stress too. Also, prolonged chronic stress from one of the other types of stress can eventually lead to spiritual stress. In fact, stress doesn't just stay in one of these 4 areas I mentioned. Eventually, it starts to spread into one or more of the other types of stress if you don't get it under control. So to recap today's episode, we talked a lot about there being 4 categories of stress, and that it's important to be able to identify what type of stress you're experiencing so that you can better know how to deal with it. The 4 types of stress are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual stress. If you're experiencing a lot of stress, it's likely that you have stress in maybe one or more of these areas, but sometimes most of our stress can originate from one type of stress. So if we can find the source of most of our stress and deal with it, we often are able to rebalance our nervous system, and some of the other forms of stress might even start to resolve on their own. So if you'd like to explore one-on-one coaching to help control and reduce stress, you can contact me on LinkedIn and also on my website at unstressmylife.com or via email. My address is info@unstressmylife.com. Until next time, take care.